An experienced photographer can produce a good image. They create images that are sharp and nicely composed, but those qualities don't always result in a great picture. Alexis Hunley gets all the technical things right when she makes photographs, but her images have an emotional weight to them, whether she is photographing people or a neighborhood. Her eyes, mind, and heart define how she sees and how she photographs. And the results have garnered her the interest of commercial clients, including Essence Magazine, Dockers, Best Buy, and Rolling Stone. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to the Candid Frame. Well, thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure to sit down and talk with you again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this time we get to talk for a little longer, which would be nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but one of the things that really kind of piqued my interest, it was your upbringing. You know, you were born in LA, but you moved around a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I really notice about your work is the whole role of sort of relationships and intimacy that exist. But I also recognize that because, you know, you had to move from different places, that it probably may have proved a challenge in terms of finding your place in each new community that you entered, especially as I read, you're often one of the few people of color in the schools that you were in.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you could start off by telling us about what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. I've spent a lot more time in the last year or so kind of rehashing that with myself, but even with my sister too, because I don't think I realized while I was in it how difficult it was. I was really shy as a kid. I'm still pretty introverted even now. And so not really having that stability, like you said, within like intimate relationships outside of like my parents was really difficult when I was a toddler. When I was really little, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, my mom's mom. And like, you know, we moved when I was 2 or 3. So I don't have any like recollection of it, but my mom has told me stories where like I just would sort of start to unravel emotionally without any real prompting. So that first move was really difficult, but every subsequent move was still difficult, but it was just, I was the type of kid to just kind of well, this is what it is what we're doing. Just kind of go with it and do my best. I would kind of hang on the outskirts and just sort of spend the first couple of weeks observing other kids just to kind of see where I would land, and would eventually sort of find myself just sort of floating between different groups. It's not super difficult for me to make friends, but those friendships were not necessarily providing the depth or the intimacy that I really wanted as a kid. Yeah, it was very lonely sometimes. Luckily, I had my sister, but that's still not the same.
I was sharing some work recently, and one of the things that someone noted was that I focus a lot with my personal projects on very much the same thing, issues of intimacy and relationships. And someone kind of asked me why, and I had really never thought about it, but part of it was that it was informed by my feeling that I lacked that when I was younger. And I was always sort of hungry for it. And like you, I was sort of shy and awkward. And so it made it a challenge for me to be able to sort of create and sustain those relationships. But I, like you just said, it made me a very good observer of people. Because one of the things I was always doing is like looking at people, especially my peers, and trying to figure out, okay, where can I squeeze in? You know, what can I do to not call any negative attention to me, but also to be looked on favorably? Though that's kind of tricky in terms of relationships, I think it helped me as a photographer, because that practice of observance that I use as sort of as a survival tool was invaluable to me as a photographer. Do you see that the same way or slightly differently?
You know, I've never really thought about it in that way. It definitely rings true that like it has such a important part of my life and my work now, because it is something that I was missing when I was younger, and something that I still search for often. I'm gonna be thinking about this for quite some time now. Give
Yeah.
me something to ruminate over tonight. Yeah, it there's no way that it doesn't impact my work because it has such a hold on me emotionally, and I just sort of process my emotions through my work that it absolutely is a filter through which I create anything.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing I like about your work is, especially with the work with your project work, like well, the project that you did on Crenshaw. I grew up in South LA off of Fig and Gage, so I'm very familiar
Mm,
with the neighborhood, and I've seen a lot of people sort of photograph in those neighborhoods. But what I really liked about your take on it is that it was about the community, about the people, the relationships that people have with each other, and not just sort of the typical landmarks like Leimert Park and the drum circle on the
mhm,
weekends. There's obvious shots that you would make if you go down there as a photographer, but I'd like that you were in the backyard, that you were on the corner, that all of those things were informing it. And I think that part of that, for the way I interpret it, is that you're being guided by the humanity and not so
mm,
much the fact that this is a good story, because sometimes I think photographers can get a little bit jaded that this is a great story photographically, but
mm.
that's the way I read it. And that's one of the things I like about your work. But tell me about your take on that particular project, and then we can talk about some of the others as well.
That is really nice to hear about that particular body of work because when I put that together, it was selfishly for me. It wasn't really about any other story than, I grew up in all these predominantly white spaces. We moved back here when I was 17, and I had never had an opportunity to like walk through a neighborhood and see everybody look like me or like they could be my family. I'd never been to a grocery store and there's mostly black people and they're not just working behind the counter. And so that really hit me hard when we moved here in a great way, but then also understanding that things were changing and they were changing swiftly, understanding the implications of gentrification and displacement and how the landscape was going to change drastically, like right in front of me, and not necessarily having the power as an individual to halt it, but at least being able to do what I do and document and archive it, even if it's just for myself, because I would always lament the fact that like I finally got to have a space where I felt seen and felt safe, and then it was gone. And I didn't take the time to archive that and make sure that I had it for myself, for our family, for even just neighbors in the community at large.
When you moved back to LA, because you had been in communities that were largely white, did you experience a phase where you're sort of questioning your blackness?
It's a really great question. I would say maybe not consciously, but the discomfort that I think would have that came from just like not really being around blackness and not being able to experience this culture that I am a part of, but didn't really get to be a part of,
Right.
didn't really hit until I went to LMU. Funny enough, my first year in college, I got into these two different programs as a freshman. One was like a cohort for psychology students. Another one was for like incoming students who were black. I was already shy and didn't want to go early.
Hmm.
But then I was like, well, do I want to go with the psych kids or do I want to go with everybody else? And I was like, that's too much of an unknown socially. At least I can focus on like being a nerd and like psych things and like academics. So I went with that. But by the time I left the school, my friend group was predominantly black. And it was never like, even in these predominantly white spaces, like I still had friends who were black, but it was always through sports. It was always through something else. It wasn't
Hmm.
like they were
Okay.
neighbors or, in any other capacity outside of that. They weren't in classes with me. I didn't see them during the day. There would be some here and there, but like no real depth. And then I could always kind of feel the distance I was there because I got along with everybody, but you can, even as a kid, you can tell when you kind of stick out. So it was either like comments about my hair or, oh, I think you're mixed or X, Y, and Z, which I never took personally. I didn't take them as compliment. I just, it is what it is. Or the distance when it came to like class and status and the assumption about how I viewed myself and my status based on my dad's job or his income, which was not mine. That is not a reflection of me as an individual, even though I'm a part of that family. And that's just not how we operated as a family, anyways. But I understand it more now, and I don't think I ever took it to heart then. It was just there's a clear wall there that just took some time to get over, and the playing field was a little bit more even. Yeah.
Yeah, my parents are both Dominican, so Spanish speaking Dominican Afro Latinos. So I grew up in South LA and there weren't really many Dominicans down there. So it was, Dominican was in my house. Out of the streets, it was,
Mm-hmm.
Mexicans, African Americans, maybe some Central Americans. So that
Right.
that issue of what am I within this community was always sort of a question. So there was a constant
Mm-hmm.
observation and adaptation that was constantly happening. And as difficult as that may have made my life, I can't help but think that people who have sort of similar experiences and become photographers can be very good photographers because they're observant and they have a sensitivity to people other people might have naturally to some extent, you know, because you're so
Mm-hmm.
hyper aware of yourself, you
Yeah.
become very hyper aware of other people. And
Right.
I think if when you're focusing on photographing people, it kind of helps because I think it gives you a certain sense of of empathy, recognizing, especially when it comes to the
Yeah.
awkwardness of being in front of a camera, right? I recognize
Yeah.
awkwardness
I
just
still hate
naturally.
it.
So just being in front of a camera
Mhm.
can just I get it.
Right. Yes. Being in front of a camera is soul crushing for me sometimes. So I try to be very sensitive to that when I'm working with people who are not in front of the camera for work or for their living or in any real capacity. Like I really empathize and try to create a space where they can feel as safe as possible because I don't particularly feel safe in front of cameras. So
Well, your grandmother was a photographer, and you had to pose for many a photograph
I
for
I did.
her. So was that discomfort
I did.
always there, or was it something that
Yes.
but you were a cooperative subject because it was your grandmother, huh?
Yes, I would do anything for her, but also she bribed us. We have like several photos, and there's one in particular that stuck in my head, and I have just like the most painful smile ever. My sister's like not even paying attention, just like looking off into the distance in her own world, and I'm just like, because she would give us red vine, ginger ale, the little gummy bears, and like whatever else we wanted. So she made sure we had what we needed. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, if I can have red vine and I can have ginger ale, I guess this is what we're gonna do. Haagen Dazs ice cream bars. All right.
To have all photo shoots as easy as that.
Right. Right. Yeah. But now I really appreciate that I can look back and I can see that work of us and our other family members and, you know, all the backdrops she uses, all the props. Like she was really just playing and exploring in a way that like was really fascinating.
Is that something that you admire about her work? The fact that she was playing?
I think it's not even necessarily about that work. It's just her artistry in general. She just did anything that she wanted. Like if she got a quote back for something, she would be like, I'm going to do it myself and would go teach herself how to lay tile. She would sew. She would like just put together anything, do any project. She was just fearless in that way. And I think that's what I admire the most and what I am drawn to. She also had really beautiful photographs, from not just of us as her grandkids, but like prior to us even existing or being thoughts. Like there's like boxes and boxes of like film and like the little slides that like I still need to go through of just like really well composed, well lit, just awesome portraits that I wish I would have been able to see with her.
So what took you from an interest in sight to wielding a camera?
I think I had always secretly wanted to do something more creative. Like since I was a little kid, my sister and I would like make little movies and put on plays, and I was always behind the camera or directing, and she was the star. We'd pull neighbors into it. You know, I would take photos with cameras that I could find, but I never gave myself the opportunity to like really lean into it fully. My very warped understanding as a kid was like, we do sports. My dad does sports. I wanted to do anything that he did. And we were good at sports. My sister and I, we were athletic. And so I was like, oh, well, we're good at this. This is what we do. And the time commitment that we had like didn't really leave any opening for anything else to be nurtured. But I still enjoyed that stuff. So by the time I got to high school and college, there were opportunities to take photo classes, but I was afraid to fail. Like I had, oh, this is my GPA. It's here, here, and here. I know the things that I'm good at. I know I'm great at these subjects. I've never done that. I've never been in a dark room. I've never, like, I don't know if I can do that. So I just wouldn't do it. I would actively not do creative stuff. I'd take a creative writing class, musical instruments, but like I ran from cameras for some reason. Even in college, I was like, I got one more semester. I'm not about to mess around with my GPA. No. And then after my grandmother died, I was working with these individuals who were putting together a company and then somehow shifted into a production company. And I remember distinctly this gentleman decided that, oh, it was my cousin's 21st birthday. And he was like, oh, bring her. We have a great photographer coming. She can get some portraits or whatever. She wants to be a model. I was like, all right, if she wants to do it. And the photographer didn't show up. And he just like
Hmm.
jumped behind the camera and decided he was a photographer. And I was like, wow, I don't think you're good at this, but it was more so what stuck with me was just like it was the audacity and the hubris of just like, I'm gonna do this now. And I was like, you can just do stuff. You can just decide that you are now a photographer, or you're now this, or you now do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, okay, if this man can try and fake his way into whatever, then like why not? So I played around with the idea a little bit, and then got some encouragement because I had photos from throughout the years that I just didn't do anything with, and they weren't bad. Like some of those images are in portfolios that I send out to clients now. They have no idea. I just sent some out the other week.
So when did you start thinking about on not just doing this as for fun or just doing it as a side gig and really making a go of it as a professional photographer?
As soon as I decided to start teaching myself, that's when I decided. Like that, I knew that that was the trajectory and the end goal because I hated all of the jobs that I had. I would be excited about the possibilities and the prospects, but within 6 or 8 months, I was just like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. This is terrible. But there was something about how open the idea of photography was. There's so many different types of ways to be a photographer, so many different styles, so many
Mm-hmm.
different things to explore that like it was a little daunting at first, like not knowing where to go. But like once I fully committed and like made myself a curriculum and made myself a schedule and just decided like I have to do this, like there's literally no other choice. Everything started to like move quicker and open up in a way where I was like, okay, I did something right. Something Things are moving in a way that make more sense. I feel better about it. I feel better about myself. I feel more like me in a way that I hadn't experienced before.
And it's really interesting that that you're saying that because you said that when it was in school, the reason you didn't take it was because you were afraid you would fail, and that it would affect badly on your GPA. But here you're making a life choice where there's still the
Yeah.
possibility of failure, but that the ramifications are far more significant. So you just described that you felt like you had a variety of paths that you could follow. So seeing it in that way, saying, well, if this doesn't work, I can try this. Or if this doesn't work, I can try this. Then seeing it in that way, do you think that helped you overcome any sort of fear that you might initially have had about taking it on?
Yeah, I think getting to that point where I was I had a really, really rough entry into like the professional adult working world. Like I really struggled. And it really, really took a toll on me emotionally. But now that I'm looking back, it's like I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to be working in those specific spaces. I'm not going to say not working a 9 to 5, but like working in those industries, working with those specific people. Like I was supposed to be doing something more creative. I was supposed to be living off of my art in whatever form that was. I don't
Hmm.
think that it's necessarily just had to be photography. I could have started with film or something else, but it needed to happen. I needed to get that point where like I was just having horrible experiences with different jobs, even though I was trying to make them work and trying to mold myself. I was being inauthentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, man. Because I know I went through that same thing. I would take on work that didn't really fit me, but I felt that I had to say yes to because it gave me a check, and it forced
Yes,
me to approach it in ways that were it wasn't natural to me, and I
absolutely.
didn't give
Yeah, that,
myself permission
that
to shoot it the way I needed to shoot it. I was doing it the way I felt I was
mm,
supposed to. That's miserable. Even if you deliver something that they're happy with, for me as a creative, it just sucks. And I
I
think
can only
that's
imagine.
part of the journey that every photographer has to make. Is you have to get a
Yeah.
point where I say, this is the way I do things, and
Hmm.
you're going to have to say no to things that don't fit that. But that's a gift when you're finally
Yeah.
able to sort of make that decision.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only reason that I was able to make that leap and just be like, I'm doing this now is because of my grandmother. That's it. She left cameras, she left gear, but she also left me a small amount of money that allowed me to not have to go and work a traditional 9 to 5 schedule. I was able to teach and nanny and like do other things so that I could spend as much time as possible trying to catch up. What I felt like was catch up. Like without that sort of support, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this. There's no question. I would have still been working a job because at the end of the day, like you said, we have bills to pay. I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have, like there's no way my parents would have been able to support me in that way. If I'd been like, oh, I want to go to this school now or do that, I wasn't going to take out any other loans for school. That was the only way that I was going to feel safe or give myself permission to make that leap. And it absolutely terrified my mother,
I can only
terrified
imagine.
her. Yeah, she did not understand. I had to tell her maybe about 6 months in. She, we both have a like very, our sense of security, particularly financial security, has a very strong hold on both of us. And so I recognize that in her. And I have to fight that often. And so when I made that leap, she didn't really understand what I was doing. And she would send me job applications or try to encourage me to apply at the place that she worked. And I had to finally tell her, like, hey, you can't do that anymore. Like, I understand that you're trying to be helpful. I feel like you're telling me that you don't think I'm going to be okay. And like, I know that I'm going to be okay. So you don't have to completely understand, but I just need you to not do that anymore. And so she respected that and she stopped. She still doesn't 100% understand how I support myself. Like she understands more because I've explained it, but it's still not 100% clear. But she respects what I'm doing and she supports it. And like, that's all I can ask for. It's like she can see that I'm okay. She can see that I can support myself, take care of myself, even though, being freelance can be a little sporadic and hectic. And I hope that it encourages her to also just like do whatever she wants. Like we're not on this earth for very long. Just do whatever you want. Please have fun.
Yeah, my parents have never understood what I did, because the idea of making a
Yeah.
living as a creative was something that wasn't
Yeah.
in their orbit. Everyone else had a quote unquote real job, so they
Right.
want the best for their kids. So if they think their kid is making a whimsical choice, they get scared.
Mm-hmm.
So you just
And
have
I
to
absolutely
understand
understand
that.
that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I get it.
So when it came to sort of learning the ins and outs of making a living as a photographer, you can teach yourself how to use a camera, how to use lenses, how to use lights, but in terms of the mechanics of getting work, whether it's commercial or editorial, um, writing an invoice, learning how to do your taxes, reaching out to editors, all those things. Where did you go
Mhm.
to learn those things?
I've had a really wonderful support system, but what sort of helped me build that foundation was a business that my sister and I put together a few years prior, maybe like a year and a half prior to when I started doing photo stuff. We came up with an idea for an app and put together a business plan. I figured out how to file and get our LLC together. We found a family friend who was a lawyer. We, based on my mom's prior work, we understood, like, general idea of labor laws and workers' comp. We had interns, and going through that process of like building a structure and foundation that is like legally and financially sound prepared me for the business side of photography, so that it was like I can spend my time being creative and trying to catch up there because I already have an idea of what I need in general, and like the things that I'm unsure of. Like I know, like, oh, I need to at least find out about this thing. Like I know I need to do an invoice, but I don't know what they typically look like. So like when I would assist other photographers and they would ask me to send an invoice, I would go online and find an invoice. Or like when they would send the call sheet out, I would make a note like, okay, this is what the call sheet looks like, and copy it. And okay, now I have a call sheet when I am ready to have a bigger production. Eventually, I made my way to portfolio reviews, and some of the reviewers during those became mentors to me. And so I had folks to ask any and all questions, editing my website, which website format looks better, down to the smallest things like font and color, newsletter, editing down my website so that I had a clear, cohesive style, to, hey, do you know a lawyer that deals with copyright stuff? All of those ins and out have come from people who've just been willing to extend their time and their knowledge to me.
Yeah. I have spent a lot of money during my photographic career. I've bought cameras, lenses, straps, filters, tripods, and way too many photo bags. Some of those things helped my photography, while others just succeeded in separating me from my money. But I never wasted money when I purchased a book for my collection. I believe those titles were the most valuable investment I ever made. When I picked them up, I was always learning something, even if I reread the book 10 years after I initially bought it. Books are the kind of gifts that keep on giving. That is why photo books continue to be so important to me, and why I believe that membership in the Charcoal Book Club is invaluable to any serious photographer. Each title stresses the importance of what one can say with a photograph. When you become a Charcoal Book Club member, you'll enjoy a great new title every month. And if you don't like that month's selection, that's okay. You can choose another of a similar value. They offer free shipping to the US, Canada, and the UK. It's subsidized elsewhere. Join the club at charcoalbookclub.com today. And remember, use the code TheCandidFrame at checkout and receive a 10% discount on your first membership payment. If you enjoy the work that we do here, we can always do with your financial support. Each episode requires time, effort, and resources, and your donations help to make the show possible. You can contribute $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/TheCandidFrame. You can contribute $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/TheCandidFrame. Thank you so much for your continued support. Well, you mentioned portfolio reviews, and I know that at some point you made contact with people, the editors at Essence, where you had the opportunity to photograph for their cover. Tell me about those initial meetings, and tell me what that portfolio looked like, and what kind of feedback that you got over that period that eventually led to you getting the assignment.
That's really funny because my first meeting with the folks at Essence, I felt like it was terrible. I felt like I was a mess because I had, mind you, I'm not from New York. So I was in New York trying to make my way through the train, kind of got lost, was just like dealing with some interpersonal stuff all over the place, get there, try not to sweat. Um, I don't know. I just felt completely overwhelmed emotionally. But the feedback I got was like, oh, your work is, my work was fine. It was solid. But they wanted to see more studio work just to see, how I handled strobes or continuous lighting. I was like, oh, okay. So I just focused on that one thing and did my best to stay in touch and continue to update them on work. And then it wasn't until, so that was probably what, 2019? It wasn't until like the summer of 2020 when I reached back out to Tracy and it was just like, hey, can we catch up? Because people were more open to doing reviews on Zoom. So I was like, oh, this is my moment because originally I had to take myself to New York a couple times a year and try and squeeze in as many meetings as possible and hope that nobody canceled or tried to switch things around. Now
Yeah.
it's like, oh, everybody's stuck at home. They're open to doing all these reviews on Zoom. Let me just ask everybody who I met in New York. Ended up working out, got back in touch, was able to show newer work, specifically, studio work, but also like how I had started to refine my work like on location, using natural light. And then they reached back out.
And how was that shooting experience?
It was fantastic and also almost overwhelming because I originally was not supposed to shoot Kiki. I shot everybody else. I shot Jermaine, I shot Arsenio. And then the day before they reached out, we're like, hey, can you go here? Can you shoot Kiki? And I was like, yeah, but I need a new assistant. My assistant is booked this day. And they were like, sorry, you can't bring anybody else. They haven't been tested in the like 2 or 3 day window. And I was like, also, you're going to shoot, at the hotel, blah, 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 but you can shoot on the roof. So I was like, oh, okay, it's fine. I can manage that by myself. It's only going to be what, maybe we're shooting for 20 minutes at most. So I set up on the roof and then they pushed the time back. And I was like, ooh, this is going to be like right as the sun dips. And so I had to put together a second setup in the hotel room. And then it got pushed again. So then it was completely dark. I was like, oh, okay. So luckily I was there several hours early, kind of anticipating, going at it alone with no assistant. And so I just spent the day. Luckily I have the R5. And so I had the little remote on my phone and I just put it on the tripod. Actually, I didn't even have a tripod. I put it up on a table because I left my tripod at home and just did my best. Figured out some different setups, some different lighting situations, and just ran with it. Kiki and her team were amazing and wonderful and gave me ample time. They stayed a little bit longer and I ended up having a great time.
Well, that's the indication of a pro is having other plans. Having your fallbacks. Especially when you're photographing
Always.
celebrities, it's just like you have to. You can't go in with just thinking, "Oh,
Right.
there's only going to be one thing." You've got to be ready for anything.
Absolutely.
There's a balance of portraiture, and there's also more sort of documentary work. And as we talked earlier about sort of finding your niche, you said that at some point you started refining your style or your look, so it was fairly uniform. But you do have two distinctive approaches. So tell me about sort of figuring out what you wanted to put out there, even though you were dealing with two genres of photography that sometimes don't generally aren't seen as yin and yang of each other.
Yeah, I think by the time I started doing more documentary work and also sharing it, I had a better sense of like what my overall style was. And so I just kind of took it as like, I'm going to just do what I do, but like in a different context. I'm just going to observe in the way that I observe. And what I found over a couple of weeks was like, I am not a photojournalist. I am not there to document news events. I am there looking for feelings and emotions in a way that is cathartic for me. Again, very selfish. I'm there for me. I'm there to process and through these other people piece together the range of my emotions and go on my own emotional roller coaster in real time.
And tell me about that, learning how to do that in your own personal way, especially when it comes to photographing, people you don't know, either perfect strangers or people that you've just met. I mean, you talked earlier about
Mm-hmm.
being sort of shy, but talk to me about your process when it comes to, working, not just working on in these settings where you're working with people, but being able to do it in a way where you can capture intimacy, emotion, and not just sort of this distant shot of people doing something that lacks that sense of engagement.
Hmm. Immediately, what started to pop into my head was like a silence, and like I feel like I get overwhelmed in very active, loud, overstimulating environments. Like it is too much for me sometimes, but having a camera and being able to like focus, like I will start to like regulate my own emotional space by honing in on those moments that like are almost like a little calm in the storm or like a more nuanced emotion than like particularly in the like protest or activist spaces that I was in. It was like a lot of the images I was seeing were more focused on the anger and the frustration and the rage, which are all justified. But I didn't feel like once I started looking through things later and like sat in process, it was like, oh, the things that I'm wanting to see, the things that I'm capturing, like I'm not seeing enough of, like I'm not fulfilled by what I'm seeing. And so I'm looking for the other side. I'm looking for the tenderness. I'm looking for the nuanced ways of showing grief, the loneliness, the emptiness, but also the joy and the community and just in a broader sense, love in all the ways that it's inhabited. And so touch has become a very central point in that work and just in my work in general.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I really like about your BLM photographs is that it has a very specific point of view. Because over the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of work, from that time, but often the images sort of blur into each other and they all kind of look the same because, as you said, they're all being taken from a certain perspective, an objective perspective. But yours and some other people's work really resonates for me because I feel like, oh, this is this person's point of view, and you can see it, you can feel it when you take a look at the photographs, just as a result of what they're choosing to pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
Because there's only so many pictures that I can see of signage of a demonstration before I just shut off, right?
Yeah.
And the person who's making these pictures wants me, or would hope wants me to connect to the humanity that's in the photographs.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's all you're photographing, you're going to miss the boat. So
Right.
I think that's one of your strengths as the photographer, is that you don't hesitate to say, no, this is how I experience it and how I choose to make the photographs. But that being said, when I take a look at the photograph, you have those BLM demonstrations and you also have your portraits. And I can hear somebody at a critique saying, you shouldn't have both of them on the site. Which photographer do you want to be? Right? Do you want to be a portrait doing editorial
Mm-hmm.
work, or do you want to be someone who's, you know, being a street photographer, a photojournalist? For you, how did you, come to terms with making the choice that you made, that this is me, this is my work, and yep, I might get that kind of criticism, but I'm going with it like your grandmother would.
I've been very lucky that I have not had a review that panned out anywhere close to that. I don't take myself that seriously. I'm always looking for honest feedback, particularly in the beginning. Now I'm at the point where I'm going to do whatever I want. Like I know that I can take on an editorial assignment that leans more towards fashion or portraiture, but I can also take on an editorial assignment that is more documentary. I probably won't take the more documentary photojournalistic assignment just because of the standards that are in place. I don't think that those standards mesh well with the way that I want to shoot, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't do it. So I just do documentary work that is more personal, that lets me sort of bring in that artistic, feeling laden look and feel that I want, because it's for me. I shoot for me. So when I'm working on my website with my mentor, she has a very good understanding of who I am, like as a person, but also like how I want to be perceived, and the work that sort of speaks to, where I am at that moment. So right now my website has a lot more documentary work. It's going to shift. I'm working on updating it right now, and it'll feel more balanced. And so that might confuse some people, but I feel like if they took the time to look through my overview or look through my client work, they would be able to see like I can do both. Like I don't have to choose. And I've never felt like as an artist I have to choose. Like when I decide to debut a motion project, then that's what I'll do. Or if I decide I want to play with clay or sculpt or do multimedia projects or something crazy with NFTs, like I'm just going to do it. I'm never going to ask for permission. It might stress some people out, but they'll be okay.
Yeah, they will be. Because I think ultimately, you have to serve yourself. You're spending so much time,
Yeah,
so much energy, creating this stuff. You might as well create stuff that you feel like you are meant to make rather than trying to
exactly.
satisfy some unknown other who you'll never be able to figure out anyway.
Right. Ever.
Oh yeah. With the portraiture, with the like for the editorial work that you're doing, tell me about, putting together a team, finding people that you can rely on to work with. I know in this town, there's no shortage of people who say they want to work with you. And there's a smaller percentage of
Mm-hmm.
actually people who should work with you. Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
and when you're pressed for time, it can be really challenging. So tell me about finding your community of other creatives so that you can do the assignments when they're given to you.
It took me a little bit of time, but I am very lucky. I only assisted for a handful of folks, and two of them in particular. I love their work and I respect them and trust their opinions. And so when it came time where I needed people, I would just call them, be like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. Who do you recommend? And I knew that these were not the type of people who were going to lead me astray. And even if jobs didn't land or, I wasn't able to work with those people immediately, I still did my best to keep those relationships. And even if it meant like, okay, I only have a personal project, I don't have as much of a rate, but I'm still going to pay. And like, I just want to start to build that relationship. It really was recommendations. Like the Sweet Life shoot, those folks came highly recommended from other photographers whose work I respect and whose opinions I trust, and they came through for me on the first time shooting with them, and now they are go tos.
Going back to the last couple of years with the whole BLM movement, there was a
Mm-hmm.
clamoring for black photographers, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
editorial world, the commercial world realized that they had not been really considering photographers of color in a way that they should have. But that's happened many times before, and they often have a
Right.
very short memory. That happened during, the uprising in 91 or 92 in LA, the Watts riots in Chicago, all those places. Same thing happened. But I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
differences about the last couple of years is that this social media has provided a wonderful opportunities for photographers of color to band together. Black women photographers is a great example of what you're associated with Polly. And the
Mm-hmm.
work that groups like that are doing, I think, are making the moment not only very different, but they're able to educate and inform its members, but also become a
Right.
force in terms of demanding not just the recognition, but fair treatment in the marketplace. So tell me about
Absolutely.
the role of that in your career over the last couple of years.
It for me it has been the sense of community going through 2020, like going into 2020 and prior to the end of May, I did not have a lot of personal relationships with other Black photographers or really other photographers in general. I was very isolated. And so once we were kind of thrust into the mix with each other in panels and interviews and articles together, I felt included, but not just included, like supported and safe with people who I had never met in a way that like is very specific to the idea and the way that I just view specifically Black women. It's a very specific type of safety and community and camaraderie that was instantly found with Black women photographers, found there, Diversified Photo, Authority Collective, like all of these spaces. But there's something specific about Black women photographers and Polly. Like what Polly does is amazing. I was just bragging about her today. Like I don't know that she sleeps. I don't know that for sure. I don't know how she does everything that she
Yeah.
does. Polly, I don't get it, but it's amazing. And it's a testament to the love that she really has for all of us and for herself because we deserve it. We deserve all of that and more. And so, even just being in the Slack group for Black women photographers, how everybody is really, any question can be asked, anybody's going to pull up and support each other. That's something that I really needed to see and really need to be a part of to feel like there was truly space for me, like
Yeah.
in the industry, and not feel so isolated and feel comfortable having really nuanced conversations first with them. But like even today, I was chatting with some different folks about licensing and agents, and a conversation that I try to have with everybody that I consider placing my career in their hands to a degree is what is your personal and company wide, not necessarily policy, like personal ethos in regards to equity. Like, what are you doing to address pay disparities? Like, do you understand that as a Black woman, I'm not making the same dollar? And like, what are you doing as an individual to rectify that or address it or even acknowledge it? And it's led to some very interesting and eye opening conversations because I have not been able to find a Black woman who runs an agency and could rep me. And like, that makes my stomach hurt. Like, that shouldn't be the case. And even when I'm, acknowledging this with these folks, they're like, I can't think of anybody either. And I've been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years. And that's a problem. So we know that that's a problem. And we know that, you might be queer or you might be this or you might be a woman, but you're still not Black. You're still not a Black woman. You're still not a queer Black woman. You're never going to really understand the nuanced care that I'm going to need. And so, because of that shortfall, like, what are you doing to address that
Yeah.
before I get married to you, essentially?
I'm so glad that you have that sense of awareness going in, because you are going into a relationship, be it this is a professional relationship, but the same dynamics, of trust,
Mm-hmm.
of someone understanding you, especially when you give voice to things about you that are very unique to you, and you don't want to have to explain yourself. You want to you
Right.
want to be
I
able to
don't
get
want
to
to have to
the
explain.
bone. You want to be able to get to the bone and not have to take the
Right.
first 15 minutes to get this person to understand.
Exactly. Or be questioned. Like, I want to be able to walk away from things or say no that are not aligned or that do not have the type of integrity that I think things deserve, and not feel like you don't understand or you're trying to push me back into it for whatever reason because you don't get it or because you want your check. That's never going to work
Yeah,
well with me. And, mm-hmm.
and a person, and even if the person isn't all that, their willingness
Yeah.
to admit that they don't know, but that they're willing to
Right.
learn sincerely, not just
Yeah.
platitudes. because it is the nature that is the world that we're living with right now. But still, you have to
Right.
question it, and I think that's one of the nice things that I think is very empowering about the times now is that a lot of young photographers feel emboldened to ask the question where they wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
before because they were fearful of how that might impact their career or their chances.
Absolutely. That's not something I would have felt comfortable asking prior to 2020 to other bosses. I have dealt with issues in the workplace for far less, not even having to do with any type of racial issue. So I definitely would not have even gotten close to this topic before.
So coming out of the pandemic, what are you looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to travel. This is the first time these last couple of years where I have not left the country, but I've been able to like really be entrenched in my community. And then at the end of last year, I was able to spend time with family. So I was able to spend time in Arizona with family, go see my grandmother and my aunts in Virginia, and sort of like make those connections again in a way where these are people that I've really only spent time with as a little kid, and now I get to reintroduce myself as an adult and like build my own relationships with them. That's been that's been really really amazing, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that photographer be and why?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Like 8 people just popped into my head right now. I just recently was in a panel with Vanessa Charlot, and we've chatted before, but listening to her talk about her work, seeing some of the newer stuff she's done, and just her presence in general, you would be remiss not to find time to chat with Vanessa without question. Her work is phenomenal, but she's also just an amazing human. So
Yeah, she is great. And for people who have not heard my conversation with her, that should be the next one you listen to after this one because she is amazing.
oh, of
Amazing.
course you've already talked with Vanessa.
Oh yeah, but
I
I
do
got
need
a
to
chance
listen
to meet
to
her,
it.
and I just wish I had more time to talk with her because
Oh,
she's one of those people that once you
yes.
have a chance to sit down with her, you can't wait till the next time.
Right? That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah,
Like, who haven't you talked to? Now I'm like racking my brain.
it's okay.
Who
It's a
else do I
great
need to chat
recommendation for
with?
people. Alexis, thank you so
Yes,
much. It was a real
yes.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks to Alexis for joining us. Find out more about her and her work by visiting alexishunley.com. And if you're a fan of our work, you have different ways to support us. You can write a review on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts and share a favorite episode on your social networks, be it Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And you can also support us financially by contributing via PayPal or Patreon. Thanks to David Mullet for his generous contribution, and thanks to Tilly Bays and D&W Images for their 5-star review. And if you can't find every episode of the show on whatever service you listen to podcasts, download the Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ebuddy and X, and this is The Candid Frame.